G'day guys, welcome back to Aussie ATPLs. Today we'll be diving back into CASA ATPL flight planning. In today's lesson we'll be taking a look at a one engine inoperative equal time point or center point question. These ones are very important as it's worth about 5 marks or 10% of your overall score, so definitely important to get these ones right in the exam. Before we get into it, if you're currently studying ATPL flight planning or any ATPL exam and you're looking for some extra support or people to talk to, I've created a free Aussie ATPLs community where you can get access to free practice exams, revision material and discussions with other students. Private one-on-one tutoring is available, although numbers are extremely limited obviously. If any of that interests you, the links are in the description below, so you can join the community today. It's my free gift to you guys just for watching the videos, so check it out. So for today, this one here is our question. We have Cairns to Alice Springs via Airway Juliet 64. The one engine inoperative equal time point is calculated as 11 nautical miles past Mount Isa, and that's assuming a return to Cairns at flight level 230 or continuing on to Alice Springs at flight level 240. So the position report we have here, which means we're in flight, is overhead Onara at flight level 330, obviously normal operations at this time. Mach is 0.80 and we have wind and a total air temperature figure as well as the gross weight. We've also got a condition report for Alice Springs and Cairns. So we've got inter at Alice Springs, a tempo at Cairns with 20 minutes of work in progress fuel as well. So we have to find how much fuel is required to be on board at the position fix to cover one engine inoperative operations between Cairns and Alice Springs. So if you're fair way into your studies, you can take a photo of this and finish the question yourself, then go through the video and see how you did. If you're just starting or want some extra help, you can go through it with me and we'll work through the answer together, get the answer at the end. Noting I will be continuing on to Alice Springs from the equal time point for the planning purposes. So if you now head to your ERC High 2 chart, you can find the route which I've highlighted here, Cairns to Alice Springs. You'll find waypoint Onara right about here, and waypoint Rivlo will be here. Our equal time point, which is 11 nautical miles past Mount Isa, is located around this point there. What I like to do when I've got the map open is find all the tracks and magnetic variations that I'm going to need for the entire question. That way I don't have to go back and look at the map every time I need extra information. So Onara to Rivlo, the distance 195 nautical miles, we've got our track and magnetic variation as well. Do the same for Rivlo to our equal time point because we have a route sector wind temperature which cuts off in the middle at Rivlo between Cairns and Mount Isa. So we'll have different winds between Onara and Rivlo compared to Rivlo and our equal time point. And then we've got our equal time point to Alice Springs, which is a distance of 352 nautical miles. This will include our descent from flight level 240 with one engine inoperative down to Alice Springs also. So this here is how I suggest laying out your working for a question like this. It gives you a visual representation of the plane's flight path, helps you stay on track along the way. So since we've already got our distances, we can enter those in. So we've got 195 nautical miles, we have 72 nautical miles, and that will make the total cruise sector between Onara and our equal time point 267 nautical miles. Now we also have 352 nautical miles from our equal time point to Alice Springs. Now, as with all questions in your flight planning exam, you obviously need an estimated fuel burn at some point. So these will be the specific air ranges that I'll be using for all my calculations, long range cruise all the way to Mach 0.84 and all the abnormal operations as well. So the only ones we'll need today is a 9.5 for Mach 0.8 and our long range cruise, a specific air range of 10.7. But feel free to take a photo of this and use it for all your questions. That's all the numbers that you'll need to remember in this exam. And these are irrespective of weight. Weight does not change. the specific air range to get your estimated fuel flows. So the first segment that I'm going to take on is our cruise calculation between Onara and our equal time point. So we have two segments here, totaling a distance of 267 kilometers. Our first is Onara to Rivlo, and Rivlo to our equal time point, as the route sector wind temperature graph in our question stopped at Rivlo, which means past Rivlo, we're going to be using the forecast conditions, as opposed to Onara to Rivlo, we're going to be using the reported conditions in our position report, which we have here. So if we use the track and the magnetic variation with this wind, and we check inside the 727 handbook with the TAT, we can find that we have a headwind of 51 knots, 18 knots of crosswind, and 7 knots of ISO deviation. We will round this to 6 or 9, depending. We just got to add them together to see what the overall number is going to be before we round it to make it more accurate. So on the other side, we'll use the route sector wind data from flight level 340. Even though we're flying at flight level 330, we don't need to interpolate here. We can just take the data as is. We then use all this information, we'll get a headwind of 53 knots, a crosswind of 54 knots, and an ISO deviation of 8 knots. So we'll start with the headwind component. So if we take 51 knots of headwind component divided by our total distance and times it by the distance in that segment, and we get 37.2 knots of headwind. We then need the other side, so 43 divided by the total distance times the segment distance gives us 11.6. If we add these together, that'll give us the estimated headwind over the total cruise segment, which would be 49 knots of headwind. Now we could do this for crosswind and ISO deviation. However, if you look at it, you can simply see the total distance. So obviously the first segment is much longer than the second segment. So the 18 knots of crosswind and the 54 knots of crosswind, you're going to get a much lower number of crosswind number, which means that ETAs won't be necessary at all. Only if it's above 50 knots will you be looking to see if you're above the 5-degree threshold for the ETAs requirement as CASA state. And with the ISO deviation, we have 7 degrees on the left, which will round down to 6, and we have 8 degrees on the right, which will round up to 9. Now, since the first segment is longer, we're going to be closer to 7, so we may as well just round this down already, and we get plus 6 degrees of ISO deviation, which is what we use for our TAS and our fuel flow figures on the next slide. So now we need to find our fuel flow figures and our airspeed to get our total fuel burn in the cruise. So to do that, we need an estimated mid-zone weight. So we'll find that one by using our specific air range, which I just spoke about earlier, of 9.5 kilos per air nautical mile. We need to adjust this for wind, obviously. So if we take our headwind, times it by 0.02, and then add on 9.5 as its headwind. Otherwise, we'd be taking it away from 9.5. That gives us a specific ground range of 10.48 kilos per ground nautical mile. Times that by our total distance, and then divided by 2 as we're looking for the fuel burn to the midpoint of our cruise zone. And that'll give us a estimated mid-zone weight once we take it away from our gross weight, which was seen in the position report, of around 75 tons once we round it, which is what we'll need to enter into the Boeing 727 handbook to find our fuel flow. First, we'll start with airspeed though. So we got ISO plus 6, a headwind of 49 knots, flight level 330, and Mach 0.8. Now I like to use the speed of sound formula, which is simple. You can type it in on a calculator and it comes through in like 10 seconds and you'll get the answer. You can do it on the whiz wheel. However, the whiz wheel can have up to 4 knots or 5 knots difference depending on just the manufacturing differences from the factory and things like that. That's why I like to use the calculator and the speed of sound formula. You can find more information about that in the community, so just hit the link in the description, you can find it there. but using the speed of sound formula, I had a TAS of 470 knots. So if you got around that on your whiz wheel, then that'll be close enough. We then take away our 49 knots of headwind, gives us 421 knots of ground speed. Take our distance divided by the ground speed, and it'll give us an hour figure of 0.6342. I like to keep it to 4 decimal places. Rounding in too much can change your total fuel flow by a little bit, and you want to be as accurate as you can, especially with these 5-point questions, which will be type and responses in the actual exam. So then we take our Mach number, flight level, and our estimated mid-zone weight, go into our 77 handbook to find our fuel flow. We will have to interpolate between 74 and 76 tons, obviously. So to do that, we take a 76-ton fuel flow and 74-ton fuel flow, add them together, divide that by 2, and then times that by 3 for our 3 engines, and we get a fuel burn per hour. Now that's not adjusted for ISA, so obviously we need to do that with ISA plus 6. We adjust it for an additional 2%, and that'll give us 4,458 kilos per hour. We then times that by our time, so how many hours it's going to take us to fly the cruise segment, which we just found, and that'll give us a total fuel burn of 2,827 kilos. So if we head back to our planning page here, also with the planning, feel free to write in any other extra information you like in here. You can put in the flight levels next to each segment. You can put in your ground speed, your fuel flow, whatever you like, whatever makes it easy for you to get the correct answer and stay on track with the question as you're going. But since we now found our fuel burn from Onara to our equal time point, we can enter that one in now. So we've got a fuel burn. To get our gross weight at our equal time point, obviously we take our gross weight to start at Onara, take away our fuel burn, and that'll give us a gross weight overhead our equal time point of 73,973. Now noting when we suffer the engine failure at the equal time point, we simply teleport down from flight level 330 to flight level 240, which is the one that we'll be using as we're heading west. And then we just continue on our normal cruise with one engine inoperative from there. So our next step will be to do our descent from the top of descent into Alice Springs with just after our one engine inoperative cruise, as we need to know the distance in the descent to then take that away to know the distance in the cruise. So we'll take a look at our descent calculation now. As with all descents, we must find our estimated landing weight. This one is very simple, and you almost don't need to do this calculation, but I'll show you just how to do it for the sake of it. So we've got a one engine inoperative specific air range of 10.7 kilos. Times that by our distance in the cruise, or the total distance over the sector, not just the distance in the cruise, and that'll give us 3,766. Take that away from our start of zone gross weight, which we just found, and that'll give us basically almost exactly 70 tons. Now, unless we're going to burn an extra 5,000 kilos of fuel, we're not going to get down to 60 tons. So you could just eyeball this one and know you're going to be landing around 70 tons, and you can use that landing weight instead of going through this calculation here. You can save yourself some time in the exam. So if we head to the descent data in the 77 handbook, from flight level 240, obviously you're going to have to interpolate between flight level 250 and 230 and use landing weight data or distance data from 70 tons. You get 85 nautical miles, burning 615 kilos in about 18 and a half minutes. So now we need to take in our wind. So we've got the route sector wind from flight level 105. We just use this one. There's no need to interpolate, as we're just using the level that's closest to halfway down the descent, which will easily be just the lowest one, which is 185. So we have our track and our variation as well, and that should give you a headwind component of 20 knots. So if we take our 20 knots, divide that by 60 for the hour, and then times it by the minutes, which is 18.5 minutes for our descent. That will give us a 6 nautical mile difference, and as it's a headwind, we're going to be taking that away from our 85 air nautical miles that we found in the graph. Make sure you always add on the extra 400 kilos for approach and maneuver, unless it specifically states a straight in approach, then you don't need to add the additional 400 kilos, and that'll give us a final descent of 79 nautical miles, burning 1015 kilos in 18.5 minutes. So now that we found our distance in the descent and our fuel burn, we can enter those in. So we have 79 nautical miles from top of descent into Alice Springs, burning 1015 kilos. So obviously we get here 273 nautical miles left over from our 552 nautical miles once we take away our descent distance. This will be our cruise between our equal time point and our top of descent. This will be at flight level 240, obviously with one engine inoperative, and that's basically the final step towards our calculation here. So our final cruise segment from our equal time point to our top of descent with one engine inoperative, we'll start obviously with our wind and ISA deviation. We're going to be taking the route sector wind temperature data from flight level 235, which we have here. Obviously the distance and our track and variation that we found earlier. And that'll give you ISA plus 6 with a headwind of 47 knots. So obviously now we need to find our estimated mid-zone weight. So to do that, we get our specific air range of 10.7 kilograms per air nautical mile. Adjust that for our headwind, times by 0.02 times 10.7 gives us 11.64 as our estimated fuel burn per ground nautical mile. Times that by the distance and then divided by 2 to get our estimated fuel burn over half of the zone. Take that from our gross weight at the start of the zone, gives you 72,384, sorry. Making our estimated mid-zone weight rounded to the nearest thousand be 72. Now if you head to page 5-11 of the 727 handbook, you'll find your one engine inoperative long range cruise data. So we're looking for flight level 240 at 72 tons. That'll give you a fuel flow of 2,201 kilos per hour. That's per engine. We're only going to have 2 of these engines now that one of them's failed. And a Mach number of 0.684. As it's long range cruise, the Mach number will vary depending on weight and altitude. Our next step is to find our ground speed and our total fuel burn across the sector. So to find our ground speed, obviously we need to find TAS first. To do that, we've got flight level 240, Mach number which we found earlier, our headwind component, and our ISA deviation of +6. So if you enter that into your whiz wheel or the speed of sound formula, which I recommend the speed of sound formula if you can figure that out, that'll give you a TAS of 417 knots. Obviously take away the headwind component, gives you a ground speed of 370 knots. Take our total distance, divide that by our ground speed, and it will give us a time in hours that it will take us to cover the distance that we need. We take our fuel flow that we found in the book earlier and times that by 2 as we've only got 2 engines remaining. One of them's inoperative, and that'll give us a fuel burn per hour. We need to adjust that for our +6 degrees of ISA or +2%. And that'll give us a total fuel burn of 4,490 kilos per hour. Obviously times our fuel burn by our time in hours it'll take us to fly the leg, and that'll give us our total fuel burn in the cruise of 3,312.7 kilos. So you can now head back to the planning page here, and we can enter in our fuel burn in the cruise between our equal time point and the top of descent with one engine inoperative as 3,312.7 kilos. Now adding all these together obviously, and we will get a total flight fuel of 7,155 kilos. Now that's not the answer to our question, that's how much flight fuel we need. We do need to find how much fuel must be on board, which will include all our reserves and things before we get our answer. So to find out what reserves we're going to require, we can head to page 1-17 of the handbook, and you've got the fuel policy table there. I've just entered in here with all the information that we've found. So we have our flight fuel, our final reserve for one engine in operative conditions is 1,500 kilos of fuel. Our weather holding at 4,000 kilos an hour. We will need to hold the fuel for the tempo at Cairns Airport, not the inter at Alice Springs, as if we lose an engine 1 nautical mile before our equal time point, we'll be returning back to Cairns, so we'll need the fuel to hold for the tempo conditions. Obviously no startup, as we've already started and we're in the air. Taxi and shutdown fuel you don't need when you're in flight, you don't need to account for that. Our variable reserve with one engine operative is still 10%, and our work in progress, which we had 20 minutes, we do not need to carry, as they will cease the works if there's an aircraft coming in an emergency state like we'll be in. And that'll give us adding all those up will give us a total fuel required on board of 13,371 kilos. That is our answer for the question. If you're after any extra exam prep or want some more practice with questions just like this, you can hit the link in the description, join the community. It's my gift to you guys. It's 100% free. You can talk to anyone on there, other pilots, other student pilots, all going through the same experience. You can talk about anything aviation on there, not just ATPLs. Just surround yourself with like-minded people. Also, let me know in the comments down below what stage of the journey you're going through and what topics you want to see me cover next. But thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.